Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hi, if you're watching us online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the head of studio here. I'm a white man in my 40s, long hair and a beard, wearing a green wool jumper that my mum bought me for Christmas. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in the space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Especially a big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Oh, wow, quite a lot. Wow. Welcome. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol. And we're funded both by Arts Council England and by generous donations from members of the public, just like yourselves. We offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. There's a kitchen back there. You're welcome to grab some tea or coffee or a glass of water. We do have a quiet space just next to this space if you need to take a break. It's just around the corner there to my left. That's your right. There's a little room there. It's got cushions and beanbags and sofas, and it's reasonably well soundproofed. So if you need to take a break for anything, just pop in there. We are not expecting a fire drill today. If you hear a fire alarm, that is probably real. So the fire exits are at the other end of the studio. Again, my left, your right, at either end. But if we need them, the studio team will direct you towards them. And then there are accessible toilets, including baby change. Don't see any babies here today, but you never know. Over there in the corridor just next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk. Those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Lawatim is here. He will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and we'll send around a microphone so the folks at home can hear what you're saying. And Nikki, our BSL interpreter, also can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. Or, starting this week, there's a new section on the Watershed website, watershed.co.uk/take part, which lists all of our activities, which are a little bit more interactive than just coming and watching a film. So if you want to see the broad sense of what we're doing, really encourage you to check that out. All right. Our speaker for today is Jon Somerscales. Jon is an experienced designer, interaction prototyper, and studio resident. As part of Studio Blue-Green, he creates work that amplifies and recenters living systems, creating impactful planet-first interventions, encouraging environmental stewardship and ecological consciousness. Sounds very fancy. Today he's going to talk about their recent work, Phycologica, an interactive immersive installation showcasing microalgae's ability to capture and store carbon through the animating power of breath. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Jon.
Well, thanks so much, Martin. That was a great introduction. And yeah, lovely to see you all here and everyone online as well. So, as Mike mentioned, I'm Jon. I'm a man in my 30s. I'm wearing a marbled jumper with lots of purples and greens on it. And I have short hair and a beard. So yeah, I'm going to talk about a project I did recently, which I co-developed with my collaborator, Andrew Stone. And also a fantastic team. It was a huge team effort. So Phycologica was an experience or a research project involving bioluminescent algae and an encounter with it through your breath. So yeah, we really approached this as a research project. We didn't know what we would come out with at the end. We did come out with an immersive experience, but we were going towards regenerative design. I'm not sure if we quite got there, but there was a lot of value in the process of trying to move towards that. So I don't really feel like I need to give, hopefully, a huge amount of context, but we're living in a world with lots of e-waste, questionable uses of lots of energy, biodiversity crisis, attention crisis, and also disconnection with nature in general. So we wanted to do something positive around that space. So we had a few research questions. One was, can co-designing with algae create more impactful experiences and considered designs, rather than, say, digital alone? And more specifically, if we take the LCD screen, what would happen if we decided to build this from the ground up using more natural technologies and solutions? And finally, how can art-driven experiences using awe really catalyze citizens towards having some kind of feeling of agency around the climate crisis? And we really believed that nature does it best. So we wanted to be inspired by nature and use nature as our guide. And this is a picture of some of our bioluminescent algae out in nature, or a very similar strain. So I wanted to start with a little bit of an onboarding. So when we did this immersive experience, we thought carefully about how we'd bring people into it, because we're taking people into a dark space, a meditative space, a calming space, and we didn't want to just take people off the street and not allow them time to compress. So we call it compression, as in you're going down into the ocean, you're going to meet this algae life form. So before we do that, before we connect with the algae, I'd like you all to connect with each other by slowing down your breath, maybe feeling a bit grounded, take some deep breaths in and out. And maybe you want to do it in time with the algae. So please take 2 deep breaths. And when you have, I'd like to tell you that one of those breaths, the oxygen, was provided by the algae. So in the whole history of the Earth, the algae has produced the oxygen for 1 in every 2 of your breaths. So that's one thing we found out about algae that we thought was really, really cool. We wanted to do more of it. And the more we worked with it, the more we discovered about algae. And I said it was a research project, but one of the things that we came out with was an immersive art installation. And so I'd like to share a video of you now. It's a rough cut video. Sorry for the audio clipping. I can find my way to it. Okay. Got there.
Submerge into the widest sea of your imagination. Move with lightness. Sense the algae, its fragility. Breathe gently with the rhythms of the low tides. Land. Now is the time to step forward. Breathe in deeply the memory of all beings on Earth. Breathe out into the algae that produces oxygen.
It actually made me feel a bit emotional.
It just got me thinking in awe about how we're connected.
That interaction with the algae felt like a very special moment.
I think for me, the first thing that struck me was reading about how algae was sort of responsible for producing the Earth's atmosphere billions of years ago. And we think of them as these tiny organisms, but actually, they sort of given life to everything.
The thing that also blew my mind was it's 1 billion years old. I was not expecting that.
It can help us in reducing climate change and helping make our world better.
And it's worth mentioning, so all the blue light you saw in there, that's the bioluminescent algae glowing, and there's like a breath interface where people breathe in, and that's translated into patterns that you see into the algae. So, I need to switch back to the tab. Getting better at that now. So I wanted to introduce Luna, who is our algae, our specific algae we're working with. So Luna, that's just our kind of nickname for them. Pyrocystis lunula, it's the Latin. So they're shaped like a crescent moon. They glow in their night phase. So every day and night, the cells actually invert, and in the night phase, they're able to glow with bioluminescence. So the bioluminescence works through an enzyme that interacts with oxygen, and that's triggered by movement. And this behavior has evolved in nature many different times, and it possibly evolved first, and then there were evolutionary benefits to it that made it stick around and appear in different situations. So this is that enzyme on the right there. But as we started to work with algae, we realized it's more than just a light source. And it's worth mentioning, that's just one specific type of algae. There's many different types, but we were attracted to working with this bioluminescent strain. But the more we worked with that as a symbol for the rest of algae kind, we realized that algae is more than a light source. It's a storyteller in its own right, and we really wanted to make algae the center of the story. So as an ancient guiding wisdom, it's been around for billions of years. This is a fossil of coffin marble, which is local to the area. And people used to collect them because they look like landscapes. And this is a fossilized algae. So algae is also really important for giving oxygen and drawing down carbon and supporting ecosystems. It can even be seen from space, as you can see here in the movements. It also has potential that has been potentially undiscovered, and also in energy and materials. And it looks beautiful at many scales, not just from satellites, but also down the microscope as well, and has huge diversity. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about our process of working with algae. So we started off with some lab training, and we were very lucky to have lots of different people that guided us, including MyWorld Bristol. And we received our culture from CSAP, who also trained us up. And an interesting story about our particular culture was that it was isolated by Beatrice Sweeney in around 1989, and was left in her lab, and it was actually her lab partner after she had passed away who sent it to be studied in Scotland. Beatrice was also an expert on the rhythms of plants and an early pioneer in the research of bioluminescence in algae. So working with algae it has certain quite strict requirements that you have to fulfill. We had to learn these. So if you're familiar with data sheets from like electrical components, kind of similar. When you receive your algae culture, there's also data sheets for algae, and they have to have the right minerals. Different seawater is different. It has different mixtures of minerals, so you need to get one that's specific to the algae you want to work with and learn how to either build that from scratch or find it. It's also very sensitive to light, ours was. It has to be kept within certain like temperature ranges, keeps in sterile conditions with the correct nutrients and the correct pH level, many more things as well. So we're all learning this as we went. And this involved a lot of lab work and learning how to do this. And also keeping the algae in the right incubators, and kind of we had our own DIY incubators. We also had access to lab incubators as well. And then we had to grow our cultures, so you have a very small amount, and then we had to learn how to keep it happy and grow up the amount of cells reliably in time for the exhibition. And that was not straightforward, and we had a few kind of moments where we were unsure if we would get there. And then when we're designing this interactive installation around the algae, we really wanted to design for and with the algae, so we had to kind of attune to the algae's rhythms, especially the day and night cycle. So we would be adapting their rhythms to work more on our timescales, but at the same time, we were kind of adapting our rhythms to work on their timescales. They were also very sensitive to fatigue, and we had to work within the safe limits and the comfortable limits for the algae to ensure they were happy. And that meant that we had to kind of design our experience around this as we were learning how to work with algae. So we weren't clear about what we were designing because we were still learning how to work with the algae. We started off with various different concepts. This is an early one. But one thing that we really wanted to do in terms of the experience is allow people to experience this natural phenomenon at human scale. So I told you before that algae is very ancient. So we wanted to kind of bring people into a present moment encounter with the algae. It can be in the ocean, so we wanted to bring people down to the depth so they could see it face to face. And also have this kind of emotion of like you're shrinking to an algae scale. So there's a spatial and time scale elements there, all coming together in the present moment. So we looked at designing this experience that involved like 3 main stages. There was a compression stage, as I mentioned earlier. Then you had the main experience, which was hopefully a meaningful and powerful encounter with the algae that left a lasting effect and hopefully changed people's mindsets or behavior or made them feel more empowered. And then this decompression stage where they have time to make sense of it and be creative themselves. So we had some inclusive design elements. So we had Jimena speaking, who was also giving directions. We had a haptic feedback floor as well. We made this very heavy duty, so it could be used by prams, etc. And then we had this kind of design engineering arm as well, where we were looking at trying to make it as modular as possible so it can be as flexible for different spaces. So we started off with this single cube of 9 speakers, sound that's driving the algae, and then we could scale that up to any number and any configuration. And then we had to make some prototypes. So we were like fabricating, testing, seeing what worked, what didn't, trial and error, and then improving the designs. So we made like 2 major prototypes before we made the final set. This is one of them out in the wild. So these are all like modular. They can be connected together. They work together. They can be programmed. They can take the input from the breath, and then they can trigger the bioluminescence in algae. And then there was a lot of calibration, and testing to do, and then refining the experience based on that. So we had an idea of what we were going for, but after we saw it, we decided to tweak it here and there. And to activate the algae within safe limits took a lot of calibration. Same with the breath sensor. We didn't want it to be too sensitive. We wanted people to feel like they were getting an immediate feedback. And then finally, deployment in the space, in the dark space, that we had to create this artificial dark space so the algae would imagine it's their night phase. And then there was this quite time-consuming decanting and setup stage every day where we had to pipette the algae in and out of the exhibit. We couldn't leave it in it overnight. And we had to do this in the dark or under red light. And then we had some supporting material, because I'm quite conscious that we were trying to work with algae, but then we ended up using a lot of electronics and aluminium. So we had some other experiments going on. So this is a 3D printed coccolithophore algae that is printed with algae filament that we had in the exhibition, so people could hold that in their hands. And then some of the supporting exhibition material we printed on seaweed paper with algae ink. And then, as I mentioned, we had this great decompression zone where Oni and Cecile were working at getting audience feedback and allowing people to input their ideas. We also run some citizen workshops, two specifically, one around allowing citizens to come up with how they want to have a future with algae. And then also our friends in the Biodesign Collective came and run a workshop on making algae batteries. So by now, we've realized that collaborating with algae is not too easy. So was it worth it? Some of the key challenges were complex care conditions. We had to make sure it was kept happy in the incubators, they had the right light at the right time, the right spectrum of light, etc. And then that was just very complex to learn about and time-consuming, but rewarding. And then there was the logistics of just transporting not only all of the hardware, but the software, the algae itself as well, because it needs to be thoughtfully transported and settled into a new location. And then I've put troubleshooting here, but actually this is also like kind of designing with interdependencies, because we didn't really know what we were designing for. We didn't know the safe limits, so we had to kind of develop that at the same time. So we're still digging into the research that we have, but some preliminary results that are coming out. Just wanted to give some overview of the project's numbers. So we're only open for 3 days because we're a little bit unsure if the algae would be happy to be exhibited, but it had 100% uptime and it worked really well. Maybe that was luck, because I can't say we had it completely nailed down to a science. But over those 3 days, we had over 200 visitors. We got 40 plus survey responses. That's not including the vox pops on the video, and also the general feedback that we got through the exquisite corpse and the chalkboard wall, and 180 plus citizens saying that this kind of changed their behavior in some way. So there's also a lot of research that can't be taken down to numbers. Some more kind of observational research that we're still looking into, but the signs are good there that people had some kind of transformative experience in a small way. So I just wanted to say some audience stories, do some quotes that came out. So it feels like you're interacting with a subtle sentient being. It's all about the connectedness of the world. We're experiencing it firsthand. Here are some common words used by the audience, the top words that came out of the surveys. And roughly 90% said they felt more connected with the microorganisms that drive our planet. And similar amount, 94.5, said that the experience changed them in some kind of positive way towards feeling more hopeful. So there's many ways that the experience did change or create audience connection to algae, and we're still digging into that. And likewise, the role of awe and wonder in this experience. these are some of the things that came out. One element is the idea of memory. So there's this thread of memory coming through, people saying it was triggering memories of their experiences with nature. So I also wanted to say some lessons that we learned from the algae, or what it taught us working with it, because it definitely changed us. So we're moving towards a algae care guide retrospectively towards designing with algae. So I think given the timescales of the project that we had, we really focused on this middle one, which was designing within the safe limits of the algae. It was all about practically working with the algae in a way that kept it happy, so it could be part of this exhibition that we had coming up. But there's also these other elements that we were thinking and talking about that we'd like to dive deeper in more in the future. So the first one is upfront, having a formal ethics statement that can be adapted and evolved as you go and improved, but to have that published and upfront, and a kind of strategy of how you're going to work with this living organism. And then the final one is designing more with endings in mind to begin with. We had this idea of using the biomass to truly create a regenerative system. That's something that we want to kind of complete and bring more of that into it, really thinking about the endings. So some other things that the algae taught us is that we have to attune to different times and scales, whether that's really ancient time scales or the algae's time scales, which when you're working with algae, it's much slower. Where we had lots of queues at the exhibition because we had to schedule people in because we were very nervous of fatiguing the algae. And so we had a lot of queues at some points. And but when we explained to people, we're doing this to protect the algae, you're kind of on algae time now, people were very kind of understanding of that. And they were happy to wait. So there's this idea of rest as well. So the idea is rest unproductive. The algae needs to rest a lot before it can glow. And we felt like we took a lot of different turnings, and some of them felt unproductive, but I don't think we'd have arrived at where we did if we hadn't have done that. The algae is very fragile individually. Every cell individually is very fragile to fatigue, but it has influence on these global systems. And we had to adjust our expectations. We set out to create an LCD screen, and I don't think this is going to replace necessarily our standard screens anytime soon. So you have to adjust your kind of expectations on what kind of information is this showing and displaying if we were to build technology from the ground up in a different way, more in tune with nature. And embrace the agency of the people visiting the exhibition to kind of create their own outcomes out of this, or behaviours, and also the agency of the algae. That was a really interesting part of it, and it was kind of scary because you didn't know what the algae was going to do, and every moment we thought it would decide to do its own thing, but it seemed to be happy, so it did what we would have liked it to do. But that's what makes it interesting. And there's many things we would have loved to do next if we had time. Add a more citizen science angle, for example, and I mentioned this more regenerative output. And so I guess where we're at now is we're just kind of interested in, we finished this exhibition, it was quite, it took a lot of logistics to put on. And so we're just kind of interested to maybe talk to venues about how we could potentially make this into something that's more kind of repeatable, and work around some of those kind of complexities in exhibiting a piece like this that involves living algae. And that's it. So thanks very much. You can follow us. You can't see the link there, but it'll be underneath the video. So our Instagram is @studio_blue_green. And it's got my But it's under the video online as well. And I've just put my personal email up there if you want to contact me personally, but there's other contacts for Studio Blue Green online as well. So thank you very much.
Right over here.
That was so fascinating. Thank you. I love
thank
the
you.
comment about how individually algae are fragile but collectively powerful. You can relate that to human beings and affecting change as well. I've got two questions. One is, what's the evolutionary benefit of bioluminescence? And how did the carbon dioxide of the audience interact with the algae? What was the kind of, how did it work?
Thank you. Yes, good questions. So the bioluminescence, I guess the scientists have been researching this, and like there's some good theories, but I guess they're theories, and the one that I was like most convinced about is that these kind of traits appear in nature, and then they find a use. So there was so it happened, and it didn't just happen in algae once. It's happened in nature with the same enzyme or similar in different areas in isolated instance, and then it will find some kind of use to stick around. So one of the leading theories is it's maybe defensive. So algae that glows gets eaten less than algae that doesn't glow, because this algae doesn't move around on its own accord, so it's basically just sitting there. So if something flashes, glows, scares away a predator, that's one reason. Like, and there might be secondary, like kind of symbiotic reasons as well. So yeah, that's why. And it seems to be quite like a energy efficient way to produce light. So it seems to be why it's appeared. And then in terms of like how the actual interaction worked, so we trialed various different breath sensors, and there's various different ways of taking an audience breath and turning that into some kind of input for a system. And I think it's actually like not so. When we started doing it, we thought it'd be quite straightforward, but it's not that straightforward to find one that works well in the context that you want. So I think it really depends on the type of breath that you want and the experience you want to create. So we had to kind of work backwards from that, but then also decide what's practical. So we found one that works. It was an airflow sensor, and then we integrated that into the system also with sound. So there was this tension where we had to protect the algae, so we didn't want the breath to kind of agitate it too much and fatigue it. But then we also wanted the audience to have this immediate feedback with the algae. So there's a few things going on to kind of balance that out, including using sound, so you get the more immediate feedback through the sound, and then the algae will light up in its own time when it's safe. And we had kind of safety features built into the software that stopped the algae being triggered by the breath if it wouldn't be safe for the algae at that moment. Thanks.
Question, Michael.
Thank you. That's two of the questions I was going to ask myself. So I'll follow that with, so you're triggering the luminescence by vibration, basically.
Yes.
As per your early slide of the waves crashing and creating that luminescence in the collision between, in the vibration of the water. What sort of frequencies, sorry, I'm an audio engineer, what sort of frequencies are you driving the system at to get that right sort of level of shaking? And also an observation, presumably the algae absorb carbon dioxide during daylight?
Yes.
Not during the night. So what we're seeing is an energy-driven, a behavior driven by the absorption of oxygen to create the energy, then to make the luminescence. Am I correct?
I think so. Yeah.
So back to what sort of frequencies were you driving the audio at?
So yeah, we did a frequency sweep and found 15 hertz worked the best. So it was just trial and error, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. And I really enjoyed how you were talking about the ethical responsibility towards the organism. And only now when you were talking about safety, I realized that the safety was not towards the human audiences, but towards the algae, that you were really considerate about what you were doing to her or it, or how would you gender her? I don't know. And I really liked how you were using this think about, I hope it was happy, and also thinking how it made people happy or didn't make people happy, and all this effective language in there. And I was wondering, because you were talking about how algae are useful for thinking about, or maybe even dealing with climate change, but did you also talk in the project about what climate change and anthropogenic, human-made climate change is causing to algae? And making them not safe and not happy? Was it a part of the project as well, or can you tell us more about that?
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, like we were very conscious of like working within the limits that within the project. I guess one of the reasons we're very conscious of that is because if we didn't keep the algae happy, they wouldn't glow, and then like there would be no experience there to see. But also that was the whole point of this project, was to kind of have that kind of relationship. So we stayed on the side of caution with that, and we were very protective of the algae. The whole way we designed the experience was around protecting the algae. The reason we had these kind of slots where people came was so we tried to have 15 minutes rest time in between to allow the algae to rest, which kind of did end up going out the window by the end of it, but like at least we tried to keep this. And I think as we worked more with the algae, we became more confident, because when we started working with it, we felt it was very fragile, because we did have a few times where it wasn't, it wasn't liking how we were treating it, and because we didn't know how to treat it, and we had to learn all of that stuff over time. And as we became more confident and the algae became more kind of like a partner and more reliable, and like we started to get slightly more relaxed, but I don't think we went anywhere near the kind of limits of the algae, because we really, really kind of designed the whole thing around keeping it safe. But yeah, that's inside the exhibition. And outside the exhibition, I think we did have some kind of writing about that in the exhibition content and supporting material. But I think one of the things that people, a lot of people, if they haven't really seen the algae, it's a microorganism, it's in the distance, it's out in the sea. Like most people maybe don't have a direct relationship with it like they would with trees. People know that trees help us, but they maybe, and they can see a tree, you can go touch a tree, but you can't necessarily with this algae. So we wanted to kind of have that encounter. And one experience that a lot of people maybe do know about algae is these harmful algal blooms, which can be bad for ecosystems, but they are kind of encouraged and more likely to happen due to human-caused climate change, or runoff, nutrient runoff into water. So there is that kind of tracking of human behaviour, which is also a really interesting angle. And we use the shiny, glowy ones because they're pretty, but there's also so many different types of algae that have so many different functions. And it's not a clear-cut story. They're not all good, or even for humans, they're not all necessarily good, as in like, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but like they have like different functions and maybe do cause harm in certain situations if they're outside of different contexts. So yeah, it's not a clear-cut story, and there's definitely more to explore there. So thank you.
Go online.
Rachel says she loves this project. She feels that the relationship between you as the artist and the algae feels like a big part of the work, and she's wondering what that felt like. Did the algae feel like a material or a pet or a collaborator or something else?
Nice question. So I think the relationship with the algae definitely changed over the course of the project. And I think it's been all of those things at some point. So to begin with, I guess like conceptually, it was exciting as like an interactive material to me. But then when you get it and you put it in the incubator or you have it on your windowsill, it starts to feel like a pet. And then you're looking after it. And then you're like, well, how do I collaborate with this algae? And like, to begin with, that sounds like a bit abstract and you don't really know how you're going to do that. So, and you have to kind of work that out. And it's like a conversation or like a trial and error over time. And I feel like we did get to that point where we're like starting to collaborate with the algae. So it's difficult when you're collaborating with someone you can't speak back to you necessarily. So you've got to kind of take different signs. Like, is it happy? Is it glowing? It was brighter today. Maybe we did something good yesterday. And I think one thing that really did change our kind of perspective is like, for months, like we were going into the lab and as we were growing our cultures, we had to count them. So if you remember from school, the quadrats, where you have to throw a quadrat on the ground and then you'd count how many organisms are in there. Essentially, you get these microscope slides that have hundreds of little squares on. And then you look through the microscope and you have to count the individual cells. You're not going to count every one, but it gives you an indication of the density of your culture. And we needed to have our culture happy and strong and at a good density for collaborating with. So when you're like looking at these individual little lunar-shaped cells, you start to have a closer relationship with them than you would if you didn't see them. When you look and you see the glow, you're probably seeing thousands of millions of cells. But when you look at them in individual level, it's different.
Hello. Oh, can he? Does it work? Oh, people online. I'm also Rachel. Hello. You said you keep saying we. So who is we? What's their skill set? And was it? It feels like this was tech people who had an interest in nature rather than the other way round. So I wonder why. What was the motivation for making this project amongst you guys, and how long did this take of these collaborators?
I'm going to go to this slide because the we is a lot, and this is just. There were so many informal conversations that we had with people that helped us out that's not even on here. But we had like great team of collaborators. So like this project was kind of conceived with Andrew and I, just through conversations we had. So we met on like the sustainable design course online, and we just kept talking about ideas, and this one just snowballed. And then as we were developing the piece, it became apparent that we needed extra support in different areas. So we brought in some really amazing people. We had some user researchers. We had amazing front of house as well, help with the sound design. Like Jimena did the sonic meditations, the overview that you heard. We had some help with the creative coding side of things as well. And then when we were actually building the fabricating the thing, I had help with the engineering as well. So it really became like an amazing project. I mean, I'd love to mention everybody, and we had people helping with like giving field recordings as well. So it really became like this amazing project where it was just incredible to see what other people brought to it as well and their talents and skills. And I guess the motivation, there's many different motivations and framings, and it depends on who you ask and when, I guess. But like, for me, it's like, one of them is like, someone was asking me this the other day, it's like being a better designer by trying to do a project like this. Because like, even if we didn't quite take it as a complete regenerative project, the fact that we tried to go there, like we learned so much along the way. And I don't think it would take much to actually get there now. So I think we made a really good strides to get there. So that's one of the motivations. It's like to explore these kind of design research questions that I said earlier, and learn from that, and then share these learnings as well.
You're a tech sort of person, are you?
Yeah, I'm really come from it from like a design research approach, but yeah, my background's in tech more than biology. So I think we all had to kind of pick up the biology as we went, and we had some amazing people at Microlab Bristol and various other institutions, scientists that helped us with the biology side of things, and we had to learn that all from scratch. But I guess there's that belief, we had this belief that like nature's always already doing amazing things, and why don't we just like learn to collaborate with nature rather than try to make some more electronics, even though there was electronics as part of this as well.
Oyster mushrooms glow in the dark as well, by the way. It's a lot easier and you can get them in the supermarket.
Yeah, it's true. Mushrooms do glow too. Yeah.
This was a really lovely exhibition. I really hope you get more opportunities to showcase it, because I feel like so many more people should get to do what we did. And my question is about the citizens workshops that you did. I wonder if you remember any ideas that they had of how they wanted to collaborate with the algae themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, the citizens workshops were really fun. We didn't know what we were doing. We just we had this idea of taking the 3D printed algae, and then that was almost like if you held that, you were speaking from the voice of the algae. And we got people into a room, and they maybe didn't necessarily see the exhibition. So our first task was to make them mini algae experts within a very short amount of time, so they could have conversations that were informed. And I think that happened quite well. So the way we did that is we had an interview with a scientist and an interview with an artist, and then we gave each person some algae facts, and then we had some like improv exercises where they shared their facts with each other. So within like 20-25 minutes, people went from like knowing nothing about algae to becoming like little mini algae experts. Well, at least they know a little slice, and together they knew a lot more. And at that point, then they could start to have like informed discussions about algae, and it was incredibly fun to watch, and it was brave for people to participate in, because asking people to improvise in public is a big ask. And they did an amazing job at becoming algae, discussing with algae. So it was a dialogue between humans and algae, and it really went through all of the emotions. It was like a soap opera. We had kind of breakups, we had everything going on, and it was like humorous at times and sweet and sad. And we always struggled to really kind of embody the algae, and we were kind of always like coming from it from a human perspective. And I'm still kind of mulling over those, but there was a lot of rich ideas in there, and at some point I want to turn those into case studies based on the kind of futures that people said they wanted to see with algae. So I want to go back to that research and like pull out what people wanted and the relationship that they saw in the future they wanted to have with it.
Hi, thank you. One of the things I think is interesting about this work is the way that it breaks down some of those distinctions between what technology is and what nature is, and the fact that actually all of our technology is made with materials that are in some way natural and of the world. So I'm wondering whether this changed your relationship that you have to other materials that you work with as well.
Yeah, you're right. All materials are of the world, and I guess for me it's important like how we got those materials, we got access to them. Like in biodesign, you can use plant matter, for example, to make materials, or kombucha or leather or whatever. And that's really interesting because you're moving towards kind of like circular material flow. But at the same point, that's still like an inanimate material at that point, because you're using like dead matter. Whereas like what we were trying to do here as well was also bring in that kind of the natural agency of the algae into the experience. So with technology, so if you put an LED on, you can design a system that's fairly robust so it will do what you expect when you send the signal to it. Whereas with this one, like it didn't necessarily always do what we expected, and there was that kind of element in there of the algae doing its own thing, even though it was responding to our signal. So I was trying to go beyond like engagement with it purely as a material, into actually using it as an intelligence in its own right or a collaborator. And I think I've been more conscious about the life cycle of materials, and it's especially important when you're encountering something in its living phase, when you're using it as a material, like it becomes more obvious then.
Question over here.
Ooh, thanks for the talk. It's very good, very interesting. I just wondered, how are the algae today? Have you sort of tended to them? And what's the future of your particular culture of algae, that is? And the other one is, how do you know that your culture hasn't been contaminated with other organisms?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in terms of the contamination, like contamination does happen, and there are signs that things have been contaminated, and like usually, like if it's a bad contamination, it'll be quite obvious, and like it just won't work, and they'll die, or they won't be happy. So that does happen, but we keep ours in incubators in like as sterile conditions as possible to minimise that. Of course, it still happens. So our culture is, it was isolated in, say, 1989 out of nature and brought into a lab and then shipped to Scotland and then looked after there. And obviously, each individual cell has a lifespan. But in terms of as a culture, as long as you keep it happy, it can just keep reproducing. As long as you keep putting the inputs in there, it will keep reproducing cells. So it's kind of as close to immortal as you get, I suppose. And so like the culture that we got, the original culture is still in Scotland. There'll still be some relatives out in the ocean. And our culture, we still have some of it, and it's in like incubators. But we're not actively growing it up into large volumes. We're keeping like an amount, and then we'll grow it up as and when we need to. So yeah, just keeping it kind of, it's not dormant, but like keeping it kind of like ticking over for now. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, I really love how you talk about the algae as if they're your friend, or like, you know, a good friend, maybe a lover. But I'm really interested in the relationship between human and algae, and I really liked your comparison to the way that we see rest as unproductive, whereas nature proves that wrong constantly. Do you have any other examples of where we can learn from algae as humans?
Yeah, so I think one big one is the time scales, I guess, because we're very used to thinking things in human time, and things have to happen like soon, but like algae's been kind of around like before us, might be around after us as well, and it's just constantly there, like with this wisdom. So I think that, I mean, it's an individual, it's single cell organism. It has some kind of behaviors that you can kind of learn from. So I think that, yeah, I'm at the moment, I'm calling it kind of wisdom. There's something there that you can learn. So you need to attune, you need to listen to it, you need to sit with it a while, and just become accustomed to it. So I think slowing down is a big one as well. But yeah, I think there's many that we could learn from the algae. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go to the front.
You said near the beginning that half the oxygen that's produced is produced by algae. Is that because of the sheer volume of algae, or are they more effective than other plants at producing oxygen?
So that's over the entire history of the Earth. So it's also because it's been here a really, really long time, and it's just been kind of forming our atmosphere. So I think I could be wrong, but I think it's to do with the volume as well, like just the amount of it and the amount of time it's been around. And
can I offer another observation of your
Sure.
relationship to your livestock? I grew up on a farm. And to me, you're like the relationship between, say, a farmer and the herd of cows. You look after them, you care for them, you build a relationship from them, and then you extract work from them. Cows in terms of production of milk, and in your case, production of light from the algae. That's the those sorts of relationships I grew up with. One final thought from me is, have you thought of higher-level organisms as visual displays? Because at work we went through a whole phase of just going on about cuttlefish. Very much more unpredictable partner to work with, I'm sure, but a multi-pixel display of high intelligence.
I know, I haven't thought about a cuttlefish display, but yeah, I mean, why not? That sounds, maybe that's the next project. But, I get what you're saying about the farm, and I guess, we're very conscious of that, and ever since the beginning of this project, we've been having these discussions and trying to work it out, and we don't have the answer, how do we really, we're working on this project, we've run these workshops, we're trying to ask citizens, how do we have this kind of collaborative relationship where we're not extracting from the algae, we're not, and that's kind of what, I don't have a good answer really, that's what we're still trying to explore, and in the meantime, we're basically just trying to be as respectful and listen as much as possible to the algae where we can, and try to find the answers, if there are answers that can be found, of how we can work better with them.
But like the farmer, if you don't look after your stock, they won't provide you with the income that you require. In your case, you have to look after your algae. So it's one of those relationships, I think.
There's an interdependency there for sure. Yeah, we've got to look after it. Yeah.
There wouldn't be so many turkeys in this world if it wasn't for Christmas. So you could say that turkeys benefit from Christmas in terms of numbers. Sorry, I grew up with all these relationships with animals.
One key difference is we're not eating our algae, but it wouldn't be good for you.
All right, I think that's probably all we got time for. So please join me in saying thank you again to Jon.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, before you all go, if you want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team. Studio team, give us a wave. There we are. If you're watching us online, please drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. If you like what you've seen here today and you want to help us keep bringing you great talks like this one, please do visit watershed.co.uk/donate. Watershed is a charity. We really do rely on the generosity of our supporters to continue our work. Thank you all for being here today. We'll see you again next time.